As a new intern at the hospital, I was tasked with checking the empty rooms. One night, as I roamed the deserted halls, my curiosity led me to a door that didn't match the building's floor plans, room 404. Intrigued by its existence, I decided to enter. Upon opening the door, I found myself in a dark and dusty room. The air was tainted with a stale odor, and the furniture seemed to belong to another era. In the center of the room, a rusty stretcher and an old medical equipment bore witness to a forgotten past. Among the scattered objects, I found a worn-out diary. Its yellowed pages revealed gruesome tales of medical experiments conducted on patients who were brought to this clandestine room. According to the diary, the hospital's doctors carried out inhuman procedures in the name of science, regardless of the patient's suffering. As I continued reading, I felt an unsettling presence around me. Shadows seemed to come to life, dancing on the walls like specters of the past. I heard unintelligible whispers and lamentations that filled me with terror. I decided to close the diary and leave the room, but something stopped me. A whispering voice called out to me from the depths of the room, urging me to stay and continue what the doctors had started decades ago. My hands trembled as I tried to flee, but the door seemed sealed, as if something malevolent were preventing my escape. From that night on, patients who spent time in room 404 began to experience strange phenomena. Vivid nightmares, shadows lurking in the corners, and voices whispering indecipherable words. I realized that I had unleashed something terrible by opening that forgotten door, and now I must confront it before it consumes everyone in its path to eternal revenge. Every night, just before I fall asleep, I see a dark figure standing in my doorway. At first I thought it was just a shadow, an illusion created by the dim streetlight filtering through the curtains. But each night, the shadow became more defined, more tangible. One night, I awoke suddenly, my heart pounding. I felt a presence in the room, and as I looked toward the door, I saw the dark figure, closer than ever, staring at me. I could not move or scream, I could only watch in horror as it slowly approached. Every step he took towards me was accompanied by a subtle creaking of the floor, a sound that seemed to echo in my head. I tried to scream, but my voice choked in my throat. My muscles were rigid, immobilized by terror. The figure stopped at the foot of my bed. I could see it had no face, just an abysmal darkness where the eyes, nose, and mouth should be. It extended a hand toward me, a pale, bony hand that seemed to absorb what little light there was in the room. I closed my eyes tightly, hoping it was all just a bad dream. But when I opened them, the figure was still there, his hand ever closer to my face. I felt an icy cold grip on my body, as if I was being absorbed by the darkness emanating from that figure. And then, just as the hand was about to touch me, I awoke with a start. My room was empty, the door closed. But the feeling of terror persisted. I knew it had not been just a dream. The figure in the doorway was real, and every night it came a little closer. Since that night, I sleep with the light on and the door locked. But every time I close my eyes, I see that figure in my mind, slowly approaching. I know it will come back, and I dread the moment when it finally reaches my bed.
My name is Javier Mendez. It all started one Monday morning when I found the first letter in my mailbox. It had no return address, just my name handwritten on the envelope. I opened it without thinking too much, assuming it might be a note from a neighbor. As I read the contents, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Javier, I know what you did Saturday night. I made sure no one else knew. Don't worry, your secret is safe, for now. The previous Saturday I had been out with friends and had a little too much to drink. I didn't remember anything particularly compromising, but the accuracy of the letter made me uneasy. I decided to ignore it, thinking it was a practical joke. However, the letters did not stop. Every day I received a new one, each one more detailed and personal. One mentioned the meal I had ordered on Tuesday at the restaurant around the corner. Another described the conversation I had had with my boss about a possible promotion. The most disturbing was one that detailed my morning routine with eerie precision, from the moment I woke up until I left for work. "You've been looking tired lately, Javier. Maybe you should change your morning coffee. The brand you use isn't the best." I began to seriously worry. Who could be watching me so closely? I decided to install security cameras in my house, both inside and outside, in the hope of catching the person responsible. But nothing out of the ordinary happened. The letters kept coming, and whoever was watching me seemed to know exactly how to avoid the cameras. I began to feel paranoid. I was suspicious of everyone around me, my neighbors, my co-workers, even my closest friends. My relationships began to deteriorate. No one understood my anxiety, and I couldn't share the letters with anyone for fear of seeming crazy. One night I received the scariest letter yet. "Tomorrow in the park, 5 p.m, come alone, it's time to talk." I decided to confront my stalker. I could no longer live with that constant fear. The next day I went to the park at the appointed time. The place was strangely deserted. I waited with my heart in my throat. Minutes passed and no one showed up. I was beginning to think I had been tricked when I saw a figure approaching. It was a middle-aged man with a calm expression and a folder in his hand. He stopped a few feet away from me and stared at me. "Javier," he said in a calm voice, "you're not easy to follow, I admit, but don't worry, I'm here to help you." My mind filled with questions and confusion. Who was this man? Why was he doing this to me? "Help me," I asked, incredulous. "How is this helping me?" "You need to know that you are not alone in this. Someone very close to you is in danger, and the only way to protect yourself is to know who you can trust." I froze, processing his words. Before I could ask any more questions, the man set the folder down and walked away without another word. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside, there were photos, notes and details about my life that only someone very close to me would know. But most disturbing was a list of names, all acquaintances of mine, with detailed notes about their routines and habits. I felt a knot in my stomach. Someone close to me, someone I trusted, was watching me. The paranoia was not unfounded. The cat and mouse game had just begun, and now I knew I could trust no one. Since moving into this quiet neighborhood, I've enjoyed the peace and serenity it offers. The mornings are perfect for walks with my dog Max, and the evenings are quiet enough to hear the crickets chirping. However, there is something unsettling about my next-door neighbor, Mr. Hernandez. It all started when I noticed that, unlike the other neighbors, Mr. Hernandez did not participate in any of the community activities. He never attended neighborhood meetings, nor was he seen at parties. His curtains were always closed, and he rarely left his house except at night, when darkness covered everything. One night, while taking out the garbage, I saw a shadow move quickly behind his basement window. My curiosity was piqued, but I dismissed any negative thoughts. I decided it was best not to prejudge him. Perhaps he was simply a secretive man. However, my intuition told me something wasn't right. Weeks passed and my curiosity turned to concern. One night, I heard strange noises coming from his house, metallic sounds and barely audible mumbling. I tried to ignore it, but my mind couldn't stop imagining what could be going on there. Finally, one night I decided I needed to know more. Stealthily, I crept out of my house and approached Mr. Hernandez's yard. The basement lights were on, and I saw a figure moving behind the curtains. I moved closer and very carefully peered through a crack. What I saw chilled my blood. Mr. Hernandez was in a room full of strange tools and objects that looked like torture instruments. On a table there were photographs and newspaper clippings about missing persons. In the center of the room, a large cage contained someone who appeared to be unconscious. I recoiled immediately, my heart pounding a mile a minute. How could this be possible? How could someone so calm and seemingly normal be involved in something so horrific? I needed help, but I couldn't go to the police without concrete evidence. The next day, I tried to act normal while thinking about how I could obtain evidence without putting myself in danger. I decided that I would set up a camera in my yard pointed toward Mr. Hernandez's basement. Several nights passed without anything unusual happening, but one early morning I captured something chilling. Mr. Hernandez came out of his house, carrying a large black plastic bag, and put it in the trunk of his car. With the evidence in hand, I went straight to the police. I handed them the recording and explained what I had seen. At first, they seemed skeptical, but the gravity of the images convinced them to investigate. Days later, the neighborhood was swarming with patrol cars and officers. They discovered that Mr. Hernandez was not only responsible for several disappearances in the area, but was also involved in a kidnapping and torture ring. The news flooded the headlines, and the neighborhood was in shock. Despite the tranquility that returned to the neighborhood after his arrest, I could never erase from my mind what I saw that night. Every time I pass by his now empty and abandoned house, I am reminded that even in the quietest of places, evil can be lurking around the corner. I am the only night security guard at Maplewood High School. Most nights are quiet, but recently something has changed. It all started 2 weeks ago when I started noticing strange things. The first night, while making my usual rounds, I heard a rustling in the air. I stopped and looked around, but no one was there. I assumed it was the wind and moved on, but as the days passed, the whispers became clearer and more persistent. They were always muffled voices speaking in a language I could not understand. The next incident occurred in the West Wing, near the science lab. It was past midnight when I saw a shadow move down the hallway. I quickly turned on my flashlight and directed it toward the shadow, but there was nothing there. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but when I checked the security cameras, I saw a blurry figure moving right where I had seen it. Each night, the experiences became more intense. I would hear footsteps behind me, doors closing on their own, and on one occasion the sound of a child's laughter echoing in the empty gymnasium. I began to doubt my sanity. I decided to talk to the day janitor, Mr. Thompson, who had worked at the school for over 30 years. I asked him if he had ever noticed anything strange. His face turned pale, and he told me a story that made my blood run cold. About 20 years ago, a student named Emily mysteriously disappeared. She was a bright but reserved girl, always the last to leave the classroom. One day, she simply didn't come home. They searched for her everywhere but never found a trace of her. Some said she was still hanging around the school looking for help. That same night, while patrolling the main hallway, I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, and there it was, a small, fuzzy figure, like a reflection in a fogged mirror. I blinked and the figure disappeared. Events became more personal. I began to find notes in my locker, written in childlike handwriting. "Help me. I'm trapped." My sleep became restless, plagued by nightmares where I saw Emily, her eyes large and pleading, trapped in a dark, cold place. One night, determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I went to the West Wing where I always felt the strongest presence. I opened the door to the basement, a place I rarely visited. The air was heavy and humid, and the silence sepulchral. I walked down slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. At the bottom of the basement, I found an ancient door I had never seen before. I opened it with difficulty, revealing a small room. In the center, there was a dust-covered desk and an open book. As I approached, I saw that the book was Emily's diary. Its last entry spoke of someone following her, someone only she could see. Suddenly, I felt icy cold and saw my breath condense in the air. The door behind me slammed shut, and the light from my flashlight flickered before going out. In the darkness, I heard a whisper, "Help me!" It was Emily's voice, clear and desperate. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I turned, and there she was, her figure ethereal and pale, tears in her eyes. "I can't get out," she said in a broken voice. "He won't let me." Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and panic engulfed me. I knew I wasn't alone, that whatever had trapped Emily was also with me. I struggled with all my might to open the door, finally managing to escape from the basement. From that night on, I quit my job. I couldn't bear the weight of what I had experienced, but I still hear whispers in my dreams, and sometimes I see the figure of a little girl in the dark corners of my house. Emily is still trapped, and I fear I will never find peace until I figure out how to free her from her spectral prison.